Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're looking at something maybe a bit unusual as source material for understanding politics. We're putting aside the usual policy papers, the legislation. Our guide today is actually a poem, a really fierce, potent, poetic document known simply as the Ballad of Corrupted Politicians.
It's a fascinating approach, isn't it? Using verse almost like an encoded map. And our mission today is, well, pretty specific. We're going to treat the claims, the metaphors, the sheer anger in this ballad as if it's a detailed expose. We're basically decoding what it alleges is the architecture of systemic failure, focusing on things like patronage and, well, ongoing corruption.
Okay, yeah, let's unpack this because the source really doesn't hold back. The core metaphor, the thing that sets up the power structure right away, is this line: oh, the foxes rule the land with cunning, gold, and guile. So we're trying to figure out how this system, supposedly run by these foxes, actually works, starting with, how they get control in the first place.
Right. And that's where the ballad gives us its first major insight. It doesn't really talk about, say, election fraud in the abstract. It talks about something much more fundamental, the transactional nature of getting power. For you listening, think about it. Right. How do you build a system like this? According to the ballad, you make economic survival dependent on political compliance.
And the text is very specific about the tools, the methods used. It wasn't, big inspiring speeches or platforms. It seems purely about leverage. The ballad says the foxes played their game with job cards in their hand. That sounds incredibly direct, a very powerful, localized kind of coercion.
It really is. And that phrase, job cards in their hand, it's such a sharp metaphor, isn't it? It implies these political figures control the most vital resource for an ordinary person, their livelihood, their job. If they control who works, well, they control behavior. It turns employment into a political chip, not something earned by skill.
Okay, so they trade compliance for jobs. But how do they secure the silence or maybe the complicity of everyone else? This is where the price mentioned is frankly shocking. The ballad says the way to buy the silent land wasn't big investments, it was immediate basic stuff. A plate of rice, a cup of wine, that's the alleged price to buy the hearts. They break the will.
That phrase, it really makes you stop and think. Is the ballad saying people are just easily bought? Or is it showing extreme economic pressure? I tend to think it's the latter. If the political cost is just a plate of rice, it suggests a population living so close to the edge that immediate survival, just getting through the day, outweighs any kind of long-term political thinking or ideals.
Right, so the whole system is built on that foundation, economic need, leverage with these very basic immediate rewards. And what's fascinating is what that says about the relationship between the rulers and the ruled as perceived by the ballad. It paints this picture where the sheer necessity of survival guarantees political quiet. It sort of bypasses any need for actual governance or accountability.
Precisely. It sets up dependency right from the start. If the first move is purely transactional trade, a meal for political control, then the next logical step is consolidation, making sure you keep that control.
Which brings up the next big question. Okay, so power's been secured using these methods. How is it then consolidated? How does it become this entrenched, self-sustaining system? This is where the ballad seems to move from that street-level patronage to, well, full-scale state capture.
And it gives a very specific example, which is quite unusual for this kind of source. It actually names names, or at least points fingers quite directly.
Yeah, this is where it gets really interesting for me. It singles out a specific political group. It details claims about the political party U.N.P, saying that when U.N.P had seized the crown, their kin took every post.
I mean, that's a huge claim of nepotism, an institutional takeover. It goes beyond just appointing your allies. It suggests a complete spoil system where power is immediately handed out along family lines.
That's a massive accusation, complete institutional capture. But does the poet get specific about the scope? Did it just affect, say, political offices?
No, not at all. The ballad is quite clear on the scope. It lists the sectors allegedly taken over by this party host kin, and they're absolutely essential functions of a state. The ports, the rails, the healing halls.
Wow. Ports, railways, and healthcare. So not just obscure ministries, we're talking about the bedrock of national commerce, transport, and critical social services. These are sectors that generate huge revenue and touch everyone's lives.
Exactly, and choosing those sectors, infrastructure and health, seems deliberate. The ballad seems to allege that the corruption isn't just about lining pockets, it's about controlling the flow of goods, people's movement, even their physical health, all falling under the control of the party host kin, allegedly.
And according to the ballad, how did someone get one of these top jobs? Was merit even a consideration?
Not according to this text. The source explicitly ties political color to the job. It claims promotion came by party hand, not merit, skill, or right. This is presented as the core mechanism of institutional decay, where competence just doesn't matter anymore. The rise of chairmen, lords, these key leadership roles. It was allegedly decided solely by their colors, green or white.
So party loyalty, what color you wear, that's the only thing that matters for getting ahead. Competence is just irrelevant. And the actual purpose of these institutions, safe railways, efficient ports, good hospitals, that becomes completely secondary to political allegiance.
Exactly. And the systemic damage from that, if true, would be profound. If every major state institution is run by a relative or an ally chosen purely for loyalty, well, the whole state apparatus gets hollowed out. It's just there for exploitation.
The message seems pretty clear. Right color, you get the job, ability doesn't matter. But the ballad suggests this decay, this rot, didn't just stop at civilian infrastructure. It claims this patronage went even deeper into core security sectors.
Yeah, the alleged extent of the influence is, frankly, quite staggering. The source claims the reach of the party call extended into the very systems meant to provide security and order. It suggests even the bodies designed to uphold the rule of law were actually subservient to the political machine.
That's a really crucial detail. It specifically claims even the soldier's gun, the watchman's post, were won by party call. Why is that so significant in mapping out this alleged system?
Well, because if the police, the military, maybe even the judiciary are compromised, if their appointments, their promotions, depend on party loyalty instead of professionalism, then there's effectively no check on the power of these foxes. It connects the dots from the initial job cards right up to total state capture. There's no independent authority left.
And this leads us to what might be the ballad's most damning point. The idea that this isn't new, it's a cycle. It connects this alleged corruption not just to the present moment in the poem, but frames it historically, suggesting this is the norm, not some temporary problem.
Yes, it really speaks to this theme of repetition, maybe even historical fatigue. It says directly, since freedom's dawn, the tale repeats, corruption rules the day. That implies this patronage system isn't specific to one party or era, but it's some kind of fundamental flaw baked into the political DNA since independence.
And that highlights the terrifying persistence of the system as the ballad sees it. You might hope that when power changes hands, when a new party comes in, things get cleaned up. But the source is pretty pessimistic about that.
That's a critical insight from the text. The corruption is portrayed as outlasting the politicians themselves. The ballad observes that even when the colors changed again, the foxes kept it all, which suggests the underlying mechanisms, the patronage, the nepotism, the transactional power there embedded in the structure itself. The politicians might change, but the foxes controlling the key levers stay put, ready to serve whoever's next.
So the problem isn't just the individual politician or even one party. It's the whole institutional framework that allows this leverage and these spoils. The wheel just keeps turning, no matter who seems to be driving it at the moment.
Exactly. And while all this systemic control is supposedly happening, the ballad also lists the grim consequences on the ground. It mentions specific high crimes, bribes and murders, quotas sold, and that the fox's pockets were lined with gold, while crucially, truth was never told.
So the systemic failure has these very real, brutal individual consequences.
Okay, so if we tie this all together, the Ballad of Corrupted Politicians basically argues there's this deeply rooted system, patronage, nepotism, transactional power. And it's persisted, essentially unchanged since freedom's dawn. It's like a self-feeding cycle that just absorbs any political change.
Yet despite this really bleak picture of repetition and persistence, the text does end with a glimmer, maybe a conditional point of hope. It talks about the potential end to the cycle. It offers a solution, but it's based on disruption, on somehow stopping this mechanism. Right, the disruption is framed as stopping the wheel. The corruption relies on that continuous turning, that repetition.
The conditional hope is quoted as, but if the wheel should one day stop, the foxes fade away. The ballad seems to argue the corruption needs that momentum, that cycle, to survive. if you can break the cycle.
The foxes lose their power base. And the final promise, the sort of goal held out, is the belief that one day truth will break their chains and cleanse this soil of vile, which puts a huge emphasis on truth as the antidote to a system built on silence and hidden deals.
Yeah, the implication seems to be that this kind of systemic corruption needs secrecy, it needs opacity, and it needs that economic dependency to really thrive.
Yeah.
So only a radical change in political honesty, maybe, and in breaking that economic leverage held over people, the job cards and the plate of rice can undermine the whole foundation.
So what does this all really mean for us thinking about it? The ballad posits that truth and stopping the systemic cycle, breaking the wheel, are the only ways out. Given the methods, the ballad describes the trading of basic needs, the control of key sectors like ports, the party loyalty and security forces. What specific parts of that wheel would actually need to stop turning permanently for these foxes to finally, as the poem hooks, fade away? That's something for you to consider as you reflect on this deep dive into the poetry of political outrage.